will say a lot of my experiences are biased by working in Windows, which itself is unique in likely the world. And in Windows, one of the core problems that we face is understanding how much any one feature or component leads to the success of the product. And so I would go to my managers and their VP and say, look, we can't compete very well with the Radius, with this third-party Radius product that's running circles around us. We should do more investment to be more competitive. They'd say, okay, well, how much more money are we going to make? And I don't really know. And I could say, well, that company makes $50 million. And they'd say, well, does that mean we're just going to have $50 million and more in sales of Windows Server? And that kind of dollar figure doesn't mean anything to VPs at Microsoft. They want to hear me say that we're going to make $500 million by doing something. So it gets to be really hard. And because when people buy the product, they get everything in it. You don't know why they were buying it. What was the specific feature that they wanted? And would getting one extra feature mean that there are more people to buy it than they were before? So that just kind of shows some of the challenges that you face. Because as a PM, you need, if you're coming up with plans for doing things with your product in the future, you have to be able to justify that to your management team and to make sure that they will put the resources behind it so that you can make those plans a reality. So PMs are strong but powerless all at the same time. And there's a phrase that goes around saying that PMs, program managers, have all the responsibility but no authority. And there's a lot of truth to that. The programmers don't work for you. The marketing group doesn't work for you. Nobody works for you. Your job, but yet you're the one responsible for making sure that the whole product succeeds. And so how do you do that? Well, you're a salesperson. I've thought about this before. I've always thought that, the best program manager would be a great salesman. That's who they should be. They should be someone who can go in there and go into a meeting with a bunch of skeptical people and everybody walks out thinking you were the best thing ever and that what you were proposing is the best thing that could happen. So that's what you need to convince everybody to get behind what you're doing. And you're a missionary. You're spreading the word around what's going on. Now, there's a lot of tools that you use to do this, and even though people don't report to you, the people in your immediate engineering team will look to you for guidance as to what to do, because that is your job to help give them that guidance. And to a certain extent, some people, the software engineers don't want that responsibility. They would rather have to say, well, I don't want to make the choices of what all the features should be, because then I'll be the one who gets blamed if this thing doesn't succeed. So, hey, yeah, please tell me what you want. That's exaggerating. In fact, there are cases where the engineers have very definite ideas of what they want to do. You have to work through that as a program manager too. So, but it's still a very fuzzy area that the world a program manager lives in is very fuzzy because nobody directly reports to you. And that actually leads to a broader cultural thing of Microsoft, which it's a consensus-driven company, very consensus-driven culture, and it's a huge matrix organization with little central authority, and to get anything done, or most things done, you have to have mutual consent of almost everybody who would be involved. And you've got to make sure that all those people are in line and that they agree with this to really get things moving. And the PM is the person responsible for making that consensus happen. You have to drive that consensus. And it's a failure of leadership of the PM if you go to your vice president or your senior managers with proposals of things to do and everyone hasn't already bought into what you're doing. If there are people, significant people who don't agree with that, and you're going to your VP, you've failed. That's a failure in your leadership as a program manager. So you need to, before you go and make any big proposals to anybody, you should have been going and talking with all of the different groups, the key people, the people who have influence make sure that they agree with what's going on. And only at that time do you go to your VPs and say, this is what we want to do, which pretty much makes the VP role one of a rubber stamp, because they're going to approve. Everybody already agrees. Great, let's go ahead with this thing. And however, some people's opinions carry more weight than others. And you have to take that into account as you're building your consensus, because you get these people who have a lot more weight behind them supporting it. That's going to help you more than getting support from a lot of other people who don't carry as much authority in the decision making. But unfortunately, there's no easy way to navigate these eddies of political influence. You can't just look at job titles and say, oh, this person is a higher job title than that person, therefore this person will have more influence than the other. It doesn't work like that. And there are some rules of thumb, but they're not always true. So in the engineering disciplines, you have the test team, the development team, and the program management team, as I've said earlier. But in those different disciplines, there's a whole hierarchy. You have the people at the bottom who are like the worker bees who do the work, the low-level program manager, the low-level tester, the low-level developer. But then you have developer managers and test managers. But at each of those levels, they're not always equal. And I can say that in many cases, the engineering group, the developers, often have greater weight in what they say than the testers. And in Microsoft in recent years, particularly with the ascendancy of Steven Sinofsky, who now is the Supremo for the Windows organization, they have moved to an even more matrix-like organization. Windows used to be organized around something called a product unit, and so you would have a PUM, a product unit manager, who was the boss for that entire product. And that person was, and so you would have a group program manager who would report to that PUM. You would have the development manager who would report to that PUM, and you'd have the test manager who would report to that PUM. But all of them at least went up to that PUM. That one PUM had that was the person who made the decision, who ultimately would have to make the decisions, even though even they wouldn't want to make the decision unless everybody agreed. They were the one who was responsible. But a few years ago, they reorganized and changed it so that there was no PUM, no product unit manager. Instead, they now have trios. The group program manager, the development manager, and the test manager are all equal, co-equal. And they have to, all three of them, agree on what's going to happen for the decisions to happen. So there's no single person now. Now it's just those three of those have to reach a consensus. So on the face of it, you would think, well, each of them have an equal say in what's going on. That is not true. And almost every group that I know of, the person who gets the short end of the stick is the test manager. Although in organizationally, they're on par. And you'll even hear people give lip service to the test group. They're not. And I must say, I feel for test people, because they're really critical to the success of a product, but they get beat up all the time. But everyone's giving them lip service. You know, they'll never say anything bad about them, but they just always get the short end of the stick with what's going on. But I will tell you that when I was a program manager, I kept really close to my test team, because they were the ones who bail me out whenever anything went bad too. So I view they're critical, but they're not given a lot of love. And so program managers they have to be communicators. They're communicators par excellence, and the key attribute of any PM it's an attribute. I'm not saying I said salesmanship is maybe the most thing that you have to be the most successful at is salesmanship. But an attribute of any PM is that you're generating this constant stream of status and updates and meetings. PMs generate more meetings than any